my mother's remark, and my brother's wife cheating. For years I put up with my mother saying, "I wish you had found a girl as pretty as Amanda." I'm Steve Hollis. Amanda was my older brother Mark's wife. Amanda was pretty and came from a rich family, but I somehow felt that money wasn't everything. And then, when I was in high school, I hung out with a large group of friends, guys and girls. Mostly we were all just friends. My mom was hoping I would start dating one of them, Karen. I didn't stand a chance. Karen was way out of my league, and I knew it. After we all graduated, I kept in touch with some of the old company. Some just moved on to new friendships, usually with co-workers. I was working as a trainee auto mechanic when I met Laura. Laura wasn't the prettiest of the girls, partly because she rarely used makeup. I really liked her, and after I worked up the courage to ask her out, we started dating. Like any other couples of the time, we had a love affair, and like many couples, we messed up and Laura got pregnant. One night, we sat around discussing it, scared to death. In the end, we both agreed that an abortion was out of the question. We were both worried about how we would tell our parents. I did the only decent thing I could think of and asked Laura to marry me. Her parents weren't happy that she was pregnant, although her father gave me credit for not running away from his daughter. My parents were not happy, and they let me know it. My mother almost fainted when I told her we were getting married. Since neither of us had money or rich parents, we got married at the local registry office. My brother was my best man and witness. Laura's sister did the honors as maid of honor and witness. There was no honeymoon due to lack of funds, so we started looking for somewhere to live. My boss's brother had a rental and property management company, and we arranged with him to rent a small one-bedroom apartment in a decent neighborhood. I went with Laura for an ultrasound, and we found out she was expecting twins. We looked at each other with an expression of, "What the hell are we going to do?" We'll see. We decided we would do our best and always put the kids first. I worked long hours to pay for everything we needed. One evening, as we were sitting watching TV, there was a knock on the door. I opened it and saw my boss Brian and his wife Linda standing there smiling. We had a cup of coffee and talked, and the question of how we were going to manage our finances was brought up. "Steve, I know you are tight right now with the birth of your children and we want to help. Let me know if you need anything and we'll take care of it." Laura was at a loss for words and began to cry. Linda sat there and comforted her. "I don't know what to say, Brian, except thank you." "Don't say anything, baby. You're busting your ass. So I think you deserve some help." Brian was true to his word, and after we made a list of what we needed, I handed it to him with the words, "We would be extremely grateful for anything you buy." Knowing Brian, I assumed he would buy the most expensive thing so that we could more easily afford the other things on the list. Both Laura and I were completely stunned a couple days later when they showed up with the full list purchases. Linda explained that they had been in our situation once and knew what it was like to struggle. The difference between us was that Brian and Linda were unable to have children, and they felt the need to help us. Not long before that, my brother and his girlfriend, Amanda, had gotten married, both of whom were 22 at the time. Amanda's parents paid for the wedding. It was a lavish event with expensive flowers and jewelry. I think Laura was a little jealous that we didn't have a wedding like that. Twice during the wedding reception, my mother made the comment, "I wish you had met a nice girl like Amanda." It pissed me off because Laura was fine. She worked just as hard as I did, and we spent the rest of our time preparing for the birth of the twins. I'll admit Laura isn't the best housekeeper in the world, but the house is always clean and tidy. The big day arrived, and Laura gave birth to twins, a boy and a girl. We settled on Jason and Sarah as the names. It was hard work for both of us at first. Laura found it even harder when I went back to work after a few days off. I worked as hard as I could, and Laura did a great job taking care of the little ones. Sometimes I would come home and all three were already asleep. Many times I would make dinner and only then wake Laura up. We would eat, talk about our days, and then get ourselves cleaned up. Our love life was okay, but nothing to shout about. Most of the time, we were so tired we cuddled in bed and fell asleep before we could do anything. Still, When we made love, Laura always enjoyed it and never complained. My parents visited quite often to see their grandchildren. My mom always grumbled about the condition of the apartment. We didn't have a tumble dryer, so everything was on the shelves in front of the radiators. I tried to let her comments pass. I knew how hard it was for Laura to cope alone with two little ones all day. As a thank you, we asked Brian and Linda to be godparents to Jason and Sarah. They were thrilled and agreed immediately. My brother told me that Jason and Sarah would be the only grandchildren Mom and Dad would get. Amanda decided she didn't want kids. Laura and I struggled for several years until the kids went to school. Laura went back to work, and soon we were renting a house with a small garden for the kids to play in. It took us a while, but we got the apartment in order. Even though all the furniture was secondhand, the only new things we bought were our bed and the kids' cribs. Our parents were always happy to see us when we came to visit. The grandchildren were growing up fast, and they loved the large garden in my parents' backyard. Laura's mom was sick, and her dad spent all of his free time caring for her. He appreciated everything we did to help, even though our options were sadly limited. What began to bother me was that whenever we went to visit my parents, Mark was there without Amanda. Once I asked where she was, Mark said she was away on a work trip. My father looked at me like he wanted to say, "Don't ask." We didn't see Mark and Amanda very often. I think it was more Amanda's choice than Mark's. Whenever they came to visit, I got the impression that she considered herself superior to Laura. Amanda usually made a few remarks about how having children was very constraining, and she liked her freedom. Laura and I chose to ignore her rather than get into an argument. Shortly before the twins' 6th birthday, Mark called us and told us that Amanda was working away and he was bored. I got the feeling that he wasn't telling us something, but I wasn't too sure how to approach him. A few days later, I found out what was bothering my brother. I was testing a client's car in the driveway when I drove past where Amanda worked. She came out of her office holding hands with some guy. They crossed the street and stopped to kiss. It was the kind of kiss that a married woman can't give to anyone but her husband. I was torn about whether I should tell my brother what I had seen. Laura said I was obliged to tell him. I knew my brother well enough to know that if Amanda was cheating, it was over between them. He wouldn't tolerate it. I decided to go consult with my father. I hoped he could tell me whether or not to keep quiet. "Son, everyone makes mistakes in life. It's whether they learn from them." "But, Dad, she could be having an affair, and that's wrong." "I know, Steve, but I think it's best if we let Mark handle this on his own for now. If he finds out, then we can be there to support him. But I don't think he'll want you telling him that Amanda's cheating." I decided to keep quiet for now. A few weeks later, Mark called and asked if I could help him out on Friday night. Naturally, I agreed, and he picked me up just after 7 p.m. "So what do you need help with, Mark?" "You'll see when we get there. I still hope I'm wrong." Mark pulled up to the Hilton Hotel about 30 miles away and parked the car. "Please let me be wrong," he muttered as I followed him to the front desk. After a brief conversation and showing his driver's license, Mark was given a key card for Amanda's room. In the elevator, he told me that he'd learned it wasn't a business trip, and he wanted to know what Amanda was up to. As we approached the room, we heard a noise inside, and it didn't take a genius to figure out what was going on inside. Mark put the key card in the door and very slowly opened it. We crept inside, me 2 steps behind him. "Oh, God, make love to me." Amanda's voice filled the room. On the bed, 2 men were making love to her. Mark stood and watched for a few seconds, videotaping what was happening. They were so engrossed that neither of them noticed us. I saw Mark slowly move forward. Then he swung his leg and kicked one guy right in the balls. The man howled, passed out, and fell off the bed. Amanda screamed, looked over her shoulder, and saw us standing there and covered herself with a sheet. The other guy got off the bed and walked toward us. Mark punched the guy in the face with his fist, and when the guy jerked back, my foot hit his crotch. He threw up on the bed. Amanda watched this with tears in her eyes. "You cheater! Don't bother coming home! I'll take your stuff to your parents. You can stay there." Mark growled at her before turning and walking away, and I followed at his heels. I remained silent. Understandably, my brother was in no mood to talk. Once out, Mark used the wire cutters and cut all the valve stems on Amanda's car. It would take her some time to rebuild the car. We walked back to Mark's house in silence. Next, we packed all of Amanda's clothes and belongings into boxes and loaded them into the car. I had only glimpsed Amanda's parents at the wedding and had no idea how they would react to the news that their daughter was coming home. The two of us and Mark unloaded all the boxes onto the doorstep. I was standing off to the side when Mark rang the doorbell. "Mark, what are you doing here and what are these boxes?" Amanda's mom asked. "These are all of Amanda's things. Since we are no longer husband and wife, I thought she might come back here. Look, that's why we're splitting up." Mark held up his phone for her mother to watch the video. The poor woman nearly fainted. We left them to take the boxes into the house. Mark gave me a ride home. I offered him to come inside, but he declined, saying he wanted to be alone for a while. The twins were asleep, and I looked in on them before joining Laura in the living room and explaining what had happened. She was clearly shocked that Amanda had acted this way and expressed her sadness. Things got really messy when it came to the divorce. Amanda started by wanting to see a counselor. Mark refused, stating that the marriage was dissolved. I didn't know it at the time, but she had been making love to these two guys for almost 6 months. When Amanda realized that Mark wasn't interested in saving the marriage, she started demanding just about anything she could get her hands on. That stopped when Mark threatened to release the video so her bosses could see it. Eventually, Amanda accepted that the marriage was over and agreed to the terms put forth by Mark. I don't know the details, but she didn't come out of it well. Shortly after the divorce was finalized, Amanda started bad-mouthing my brother to anyone who would agree to listen. She made the mistake of doing this when Laura and I were at a rare party, my parents babysitting so we could go to the pub. We were talking to a few friends when Amanda started her venomous speech. Before I could say a word, Laura stood in front of her. "If you wanted to sleep around like a common cheater, why did you even bother to marry Mark? He didn't deserve to be treated like that, Amanda. You worthless fool." Amanda stood stunned and silent as Laura slapped her. "Before you start swearing, why don't you tell people what you were doing in a hotel room with 2 men? You disgust me. You're nothing but a cheater." Laura returned to our group as Amanda silently left the pub, many giggling after her. Later that night, I told my mom and dad what had happened. My dad smiled and said Amanda deserved it. When I was alone with my mom, I asked her a question. "Do you still wish I had met a girl as lovely as Amanda?" Mom looked at me and smiled as if to say, "Okay, I was wrong." The end.